Okay, so we've all seen it, right? That utility bill arrives and is like, whoa, where did that come from?
Yeah, those utility bills can be a real shocker sometimes.
Well, today we're going deep on water and sewer rates, specifically in Harford County, Maryland.
Sounds familiar.
Right. It's been in the news. We found a good article from CBS Baltimore about it.
Ah, CBS Baltimore, okay.
Rate hikes, they happen, right?
Yeah.
But we want to know why. Like, what's the story? What's going on in Harford County? How does it compare to, like, the counties around them? And is this, like, a bigger thing? Like, is this happening everywhere?
Yeah, good questions. And to get to those whys, the article pointed this out about how Harford County does their water and sewer. It's something called a nonprofit enterprise fund activity.
Okay, nonprofit enterprise fund activity. That's a mouthful.
It is, but basically what it means is that the water and sewer system, it's funded by the people who use it, not like taxes in general.
So it's not, like, just part of our property taxes or anything. We're paying directly for the water we use.
Exactly.
Huh. So, like, kind of like a prepaid phone plan for water.
That's a good way to think about it.
Okay, so is that, like, normal? Is that how most places do it? The CBS article, it mentioned rate hikes in Baltimore City, too. And for BGE customers? Are those, like, the same deal?
Not always. It can be different. Like, there are a few different ways they fund utilities, right? Some are, like you said, tied to taxes. Some are directly from the users, like in Harford County. And then some are like a mix of both.
A hybrid.
Yeah, hybrid. And they each have, pros and cons. Like with the user-funded systems, they can be more affected by changes in costs.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
If something costs more to, like, treat the water, the customer's going to see that on their bill pretty quickly.
Right. But on the other hand, they tend to be more transparent. You can see where your money's going.
Yeah, I guess that direct connection, like you said, probably makes them more accountable, too, to the people paying.
Exactly.
Okay, so back to Harford County. The article says they're looking at increasing rates, like 4.2% each year for the next 5 years.
Yeah, that's right.
That's a bit lower than the last 5 years, right? Wasn't it 4.5% then?
Yeah, it was a bit higher before.
Okay, well, any increase, like, makes you think, right?
Sure, yeah. And it's important to note, this 4.2%, it's not a done deal. The county council, they're going to vote on it. But first, they're holding public hearings so people can, give their input.
Okay, so people can have a say. That's good. But here's the thing that I thought was kind of interesting. The CBS article said even with this increase, Harford County's rates are still some of the lowest around.
Really?
Yeah, like the third lowest out of 12 different water systems in the area. So, like, what's going on there? Are they just, like, really good at managing things? Or are the other places just charging too much?
I mean, it's probably a mix of things. It's not cheap, to run a water system. You got those treatment plants. They need energy to run. Plus all the chemicals, right, to make sure the water's safe.
Oh, right, all the regulations and everything.
Yeah, tons of regulations. And then there's the workers, the people running it all. The article even mentioned how their wages have been increasing more than, like the normal inflation rate. And then don't forget the infrastructure, all those pipes, pumps, everything. It all gets old, needs repairs.
Yeah, that's true. I guess it's easy to forget about all that stuff, like you just turn on the tap and boom, clean water.
Yeah.
But there's a whole system behind it.
Exactly. And all those costs, they can be really different depending on where you are. So it's hard to just compare, apples to apples.
True. The article mentioned another interesting thing. It said, like, even with the increase, people in Harford County would still be paying less than a penny per gallon for their water.
Oh, that's pretty cheap.
And then, like, 2 cents per gallon for the wastewater treatment.
Interesting.
It got me thinking, like, what does that actually mean, day to day? Like, how much does it cost to take a shower or do a load of laundry?
It's easy to get lost in those big numbers, yeah. Putting it into everyday things, that makes more sense.
Yeah, so I did a little, like, back-of-the-napkin math. Like, say you take a 10-minute shower.
Okay.
You're probably spending, like, 12 cents for the water, and then, like, another 24 cents for them to treat that water afterwards.
Wow. That's really not much.
Right. And for a load of laundry, maybe 15 cents for the water, and then double that, 30 cents for the treatment.
It really makes you appreciate it, right? Like, just how much goes into having clean water.
It does. But it also makes me think, even if Harford County's rates are low now, that doesn't mean they'll stay that way,
Yeah, that's true.
especially with all those challenges we talked about,
Yeah.
like the aging infrastructure. The article said it's really important to keep investing in the system.
Right.
Like if they don't, it's going to get more expensive to fix later.
Exactly. You got to stay ahead of it.
So they had this thing done called a cost of service analysis by a company called Arcadis.
Oh, I've heard of them.
The article said they're like a global consulting firm specializing in water and sewer rates. So, like, what is that? What does a cost of service analysis even mean?
Oh, it sounds complicated, but it's basically a way to make sure those rates are like fair and sustainable.
Yeah.
They look at the whole system, like the infrastructure, how much it costs to run everything, how much water people are actually using, and how much they think people will need in the future.
So it's all based on data, not just like someone picking a random number.
Exactly. They got to figure out how much money they need to keep everything working now and in the future.
Makes sense. And it's good that it's done by like an independent expert.
Right.
That makes it more transparent.
Absolutely. It keeps things more objective, less likely to be influenced by, politics and stuff.
Right. No one wants their water bill to become a political football.
Exactly.
Yeah, you don't want your water bill to be like caught in the middle of some political fight.
You really don't. And speaking of politics, the CBS article did mention some of kind of like the pushback that's happening in Maryland, like about utility costs in general, going up.
Right, right. Like that thing, the Ratepayer Protection Act, they talked about that, about trying to keep those gas companies from raising their rates too much.
Yeah, and then there's that whole debate about the Climate Solutions Affordability Act. Some lawmakers, they're worried, like, what if these climate requirements end up hurting people financially?
Yeah, yeah. The article said they might actually slow down some of those requirements if they think they're going to be like too tough on the economy.
Mm.
And there was also something about some GOP lawmakers wanting to like get rid of that Empower Maryland Energy Efficiency Act,
Yeah.
which is kind of weird, right? Because that was supposed to help people save money on their utilities in the first place.
Yeah, it really shows you how complicated all this is. You've got like the need to go green, to switch to cleaner energy, but also, people got to be able to afford it. It's like this balancing act. And it's not just in Maryland, it's everywhere.
It's like we're trying to figure out like how to build this better future, but without like making things too hard for people, especially people who are already having a tough time, financially.
Exactly. And those public hearings, the ones we talked about for Harford County, those are really important.
Yeah, yeah, because people can actually like go and tell the county council what they think.
Exactly. It's not just numbers on a piece of paper, right?
Yeah.
It's about how these decisions affect real people, their lives.
Mhm.
And it makes the process more, transparent, holds people accountable, makes sure that the people who are actually paying, they get to say something about how their money is being used.
So, like, people should really go to these meetings, ask questions, make sure they're heard. What would you say are like the best ways to get involved?
Well, first, they got to know when and where these hearings are happening, right? Keep up with what the county council's doing.
I'm sure they'll post it all, like on the county website and probably in the local news.
Yep, exactly. And then they can decide like how they want to participate. If they want to talk to the council members directly, going to the hearings is the best way. But they can also reach out to them, individually, like through email, phone calls, letters. Those all work.
It's good to have choices, right? Like you're not just stuck like on the sidelines.
Exactly. You have a voice. And this is like a perfect example of how important it is to like be an active citizen. Your voice matters. You can really make a difference. It's easy to forget, with everything going on, but we have the power to affect what happens in our communities.
Okay, so we've talked about these proposed increases in Harford County, why they're happening, all the politics involved, and how people can like get involved themselves. We even did some math, right? Like to see what these increases might mean for, your everyday life.
And we touched on those different models of how they fund utilities.
Right.
And how important it is to be transparent and, hold people accountable for setting those rates.
We've covered a lot, but I feel like we're just like scratching the surface of this whole water thing.
Oh, yeah, there's so much more to it, especially when we're talking about something as important as water. But before we go too deep, maybe we should recap, like, what are the key things we want people to remember from all this?
Yeah, good idea. What do you think are the most important points?
Well, I hope they come away with, like, a better understanding of just how complex water and sewer systems really are. They're intricate and expensive to run. And ultimately, those costs, they get passed on to us, whether it's directly, like on our water bill, or indirectly, like through taxes. Clean water doesn't just magically appear when you turn on the tap. There are people, resources, expertise. A lot goes into making it happen.
And even though Harford County seems to be doing like a pretty good job so far keeping those rates low, there are still, those big long-term issues they have to deal with, like the aging infrastructure and the fact that energy costs and the cost to treat the water, they just keep going up.
That's right. And we can't forget about all the politics, right? Trying to balance keeping things affordable with, protecting the environment. Those conversations are going to keep happening.
It's a lot to think about. But it is important to, like, be aware of this stuff.
Yeah.
And understand how it could affect us in the future.
Absolutely. And this brings up another point, like what can we do about all this? Besides those public hearings, I mean, we talked about conserving water, being more efficient, but are there other things?
Yeah, are there other ways we can make a difference?
I think so. And it helps to think about it on like different levels. Like personally, each of us can be more mindful of how much water we're using, like fixing leaky faucets, getting appliances that are more efficient, water-wise. Even think about our yards, like planting stuff that doesn't need as much water.
Yeah, those were all good things to do.
Right.
And anyone can do them, right? You don't need a lot of money or anything.
Mm.
But what about those bigger changes? Like you mentioned something about like systemic changes, right?
Right. We need policies that encourage people to conserve water, that help develop new technologies, and that make sure everyone has access to clean, affordable water. That means putting money into the infrastructure, pipes and treatment plants, and supporting research so we can come up with better ways to do things. And maybe, like, rethink how we price water altogether so it reflects how valuable it really is.
That's a lot, but, I am starting to feel more hopeful. Like, there are things we can do. We can make things better.
Exactly. We don't have to just sit back and watch. We can all do something. And even small things can make a difference.
We've been talking about what's happening locally in Harford County, but also, like, the bigger picture, the politics, the environment. It's been a journey.
And we're just starting to explore all this. Water is fascinating. There's so much to learn. But before we get carried away, let's take a quick break. We'll come back for the last part of our deep dive into Harford County water rates. Don't go anywhere.
We're back, and we've been really getting into these water rates in Harford County, Maryland.
Yeah, we've gone pretty deep, haven't we?
We have. We've looked at how the whole water system works, like all the nuts and bolts.
The pipes and pumps and all that.
Exactly. And we've talked about all those, like, bigger things that are affecting water, like politics and the environment.
Especially climate change, right? That's a big one.
Huge. So I got to say, it's been informative, but also I'm a little overwhelmed, honestly. Like, we've got some big challenges when it comes to water.
Yeah, we do. But I think there are also some good things coming out of it.
Oh, really? Like what?
Well, sometimes, when we're forced to deal with problems, it makes us more creative.
Interesting. So you're saying, like, because water is becoming more scarce and more expensive, that could actually lead to some positive changes.
Exactly. When we realize something's limited, we start looking for better ways to use it. If water was always easy to get and cheap, would we even care about conserving it?
Probably not. We just take it for granted.
Right. But now we're starting to think differently. Like, how much is water really worth? How should we be using it? How can we manage it better?
I like that. It's like a whole new way of thinking about water.
Yeah, and that new perspective, that could make a big difference.
So where do we go from here? What can people actually do? We've talked about conserving water, coming up with new technologies, but is there anything else?
There is, and I think it helps to think about it on different levels, like personal, individual things we can all do.
Like what?
Well, we can be more careful about how much water we use, like you said, fixing leaks, getting those water-saving appliances, even the plants in our yards, choose ones that don't need so much water.
Yeah, that makes sense. Simple things that everyone can do.
Right. But then there are those bigger changes, like, policies and stuff.
Right, the systemic changes we talked about.
Exactly. We need laws that help people save water, that encourage new inventions, and that make sure everyone has access to clean water that they can afford. That means investing in the water system, making sure the pipes and treatment plants are in good shape.
Yeah, and supporting research so we can find better ways to do things.
Right. And maybe even rethink how we charge for water so the price reflects how valuable it really is.
It's a lot to think about, but I'm starting to feel optimistic, like we can do this.
We can. We don't have to just stand by and watch. We all have a part to play. Even small things can make a difference.
Well said. And to everyone listening, we hope this deep dive has given you a better understanding of how this whole water rate thing works. And even more importantly, we hope it's made you curious. Like, go out and learn more, find out what's happening in your community, and maybe even do something about it. Thanks for joining us.